My mother yelled that I was nothing but a burden. She tossed my bags out the door and ordered me to get out. I left without a word. 3 weeks later, my father called in a frenzy, asking why our bank account was locked. I simply said, "Ask the burden." Then everything unraveled. Hey, Reddit. It began on a Tuesday, one of those bleak, overcast days where the clouds feel oppressive and the tension sticks to you like damp air. I'd just returned from another grueling shift at my temp job, the kind that barely covers fuel, let alone bills or groceries. At 26, I was still at my parents' house, not out of laziness or lack of ambition, but because life had dealt me a rough hand. I graduated into an economic slump, then lost 2 jobs in a row to layoffs. I tried everything, side gigs, online work, even weekend labor jobs. I paid rent, bought my own food, and chipped in for bills when I could. But to my mother, none of that counted. That day, I walked into a war zone. My mother was waiting in the living room, arms folded, her face set in that familiar grimace that signaled an incoming tirade. She didn't even let me put my bag down before she started, accusing me of mooching, of being a grown man with no shame, of dragging the family down. I tried to explain that I was job hunting, attending interviews, doing my best, but she wasn't listening. She screamed that I was a burden, a dead weight sapping her strength. Then, in a fit of rage, she grabbed my emergency duffel from the hallway and flung it outside like it was garbage. My father stayed silent, sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to read a magazine, his hands clenched tight. I caught his gaze for a fleeting moment, and in that instant, I knew I couldn't stay. There was no home left here, no warmth to hold on to, so I grabbed my bag, looked at them both, and walked away. I didn't slam the door or yell. I just left. And that quiet exit? It shook them more than any fight ever could. The days after were odd. There was a strange calm in being away from that house, even if I was crashing on a friend's sofa with no clear path forward. I'd wake early, send out job applications, take long walks to clear my mind, and finally let myself breathe. For the first time in ages, I wasn't dodging glares at dinner or feeling judged during TV ads about successful people buying homes or fancy cars. My friend, Jake, didn't push for details, just gave me a blanket, a spare key, and space to exist. We'd chat about music or old times, but my parents were a topic I avoided. It felt toxic, like even mentioning them would pull me under. Deep down, though, a quiet anger simmered. How had I become the scapegoat in a house where I did nothing but try? It wasn't just my mother's harsh words that stung. It was the years behind them. Years of being the dependable one, the son who fixed their devices, managed their online payments, set up their subscriptions, printed their documents, and never asked for recognition. I didn't cause trouble or bring chaos home. I kept my head down and did what felt right. Yet somehow, I was the failure. When my younger brother wrecked his car after drinking, they paid his fines and called it a youthful error. When my older sister ditched college to wander through 3 cities in a year, they cheered her for following her heart. But me? I was labeled a burden for needing time to recover from a world that promises success but delivers setbacks. So while they basked in their obliviousness, I took quiet steps to cut ties. I logged into our joint bank account. Yes, joint. When I moved back home, my father asked me to help manage finances, so I was added as a secondary user with full access. It simplified things for years, but now it was the last link binding me to them, and I wouldn't leave it hanging. I removed my access with proper verification, flagged a few suspicious recurring payments they'd ignored, and asked the bank to pause any changes until my father, the primary holder, confirmed them. It was standard security protocol, but to them, it would feel like a financial earthquake. 3 weeks after the fight, the call came. I was in Jake's kitchen, warming up leftover noodles, when my phone buzzed. It was my father. I stared at the screen, unsure if I wanted to answer. It rang twice more before I picked up. His voice was frantic, almost shrill, like I hadn't heard since my grandfather's passing. Why was the account locked? Why couldn't he pay the bills? What had I done? I heard my mother in the background, raging, blaming him, blaming me, blaming everyone but herself. I let him vent for nearly 2 minutes, then calmly said, "Ask the burdened." Burden. Then I hung up. The silence that followed felt like a release, but I knew the storm wasn't over. 2 days later, an email arrived from their lawyer. Apparently, I'd caused disruption. They claimed I'd abused my access, painting me as a cunning manipulator who'd targeted his helpless parents. I laughed out loud. Then I spent an hour gathering screenshots, email chains, and bank logs, everything proving I hadn't touched a dime that wasn't mine. My lawyer reviewed it and said I was in the clear, legally untouchable, but the sting of their betrayal lingered. They'd rather drag me through the courts than admit their wrongs. That night, I stood on Jake's small balcony, gazing at the city lights, reflecting on years spent chasing their approval. All the birthdays I spent troubleshooting their internet. All the times I absorbed blame for things I didn't do. Now I was out, but freedom still felt out of reach. I knew my mother wouldn't let this go quietly. She needed a target to crush, and I was it. But I'd chosen myself, and I was ready for whatever came next. The fallout hit fast. One minute, I was the so-called burden under their roof, unworthy of respect. The next, I was the family villain, slandered in group chats and whispered about by relatives. My cousin Emily texted frantic, asking if I'd really drained my parents' account and vanished. That's when I realized they weren't just mad. They were rewriting history. In their story, I was a malicious schemer, not the son who kept their finances afloat while they fumbled online banking. An uncle blocked me online. An aunt left a snide voicemail about family loyalty. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had evidence, receipts, logs, notifications, saved in a folder labeled just in case, backed up in 3 places. But I didn't fight back yet. I had something better than retaliation. Purpose. I'd landed a solid IT job at a mid-sized company. Nothing flashy, but stable, secure, exactly what I'd been chasing. I accepted the offer with a quiet grin, left Jake's couch, and moved into a small apartment with just enough room for my laptop, a bed, and a table. It was modest, but it was mine. No one could kick me out or call me a failure here. That first night, standing in my empty living room, I felt a peace I'd built myself, not borrowed from someone else's tolerance. Meanwhile, my parents were spiraling. Word got around that my father's business account, tied to the frozen personal one, caused him to miss vendor payments. His credit line was flagged, his car lease denied. They were drowning in chaos, too stubborn to admit their role in it. They never called to check on me or apologize. But then, something shifted. My sister called, not my parents. The same sister who once mocked my job loss and my living situation. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. She said my father was in the hospital with stress-related heart issues after collapsing during a meeting. The doctors called it a close call. The anger I'd carried flickered. My father may have sat silently as my mother threw me out, but he wasn't cruel like her. He was weak. I asked which hospital, thanked her, and wrestled with whether to go. I didn't, knowing my presence would spark another fight. Instead, I sent flowers, white lilies, like the ones he sent me at graduation. No note, just the gesture. That small act broke something open. 2 days later, he texted, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, torn between guarding my peace and remembering the man who slipped me cash when my mother cut me off, who stayed up late helping with math despite barely understanding it, who once called me the smartest person he knew. We met at a quiet diner, just the 2 of us. He looked worn, older than I remembered. The silence between us was heavy, but not hostile. He apologized, admitting he'd been a coward, too afraid of conflict to defend me. I told him I valued his words but wasn't sure I could return. Not to that house or that dynamic. He nodded, accepting it. Then he said something that shifted everything. After I left, the house changed. My mother grew colder, lashing out at everyone. He realized I'd been the one holding things together, unnoticed. He called me the foundation, not a burden. It hit hard. A week later, my mother sent a long, vague message about family being messy and words being said in anger. No apology, no accountability, just excuses. I didn't respond. Forgiveness doesn't erase scars, and some heal only with space. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've rebuilt my life. I got a promotion, bought a used car, furnished my apartment slowly. I started therapy and joined a local group, making real friends. Every night, I sleep in a home I earned, where no one can call me a burden. My father and I text occasionally. He's trying, and I respect that. We're not what we were, but maybe we'll build something new. My mother? I've accepted she may never see me for who I am. And that's fine. I don't live for her validation anymore. I'm not a burden. I never was. And now, I'm truly free.